exciting podcast where we have transformative and insightful conversations on issues facing our veterans. I'm your host, Dee Dee Gladowski, and today we have a very special guest, Paul Lawrence, the former Secretary of Benefits at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and author of Veterans Benefit for You. Paul, thank you for joining me today. Your extensive experience in the veteran affairs world is invaluable, and I'm excited to discuss your book and pressing issues that surround our veteran benefits, particularly with disparities, if they are out there. I know I've watched and I've kind of followed you on LinkedIn regarding your whiteboard. And so I did learn, I've learned a lot. And I think a lot of people who, after all this, I hope they follow you will, if they have any questions regarding veteran benefits, will have a better, walk away with a better knowledge. So welcome again and thank you for being here.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. And just to clarify, right, there's only one secretary of the VA. I was the undersecretary for benefits. So that's my,
Undersecretary.
yeah, I just don't, in
Misspoke.
this day and age when we have stolen valor, I just want everybody to know what I was. But yes, yeah, thank you very much. And you're referring to the stuff I do on LinkedIn where I make videos about benefits. So yeah, I hope people will follow, look at that. If they have questions, they can always send me a message on LinkedIn. But it's great to be with you here today.
Thanks for that correction. Didn't want to, miscategorize you. So thank you. And so, um, I I tell you, thank you first of all for the book. I started laughing. I said, God, I wish I had this book 2 years prior to my retirement. It would have saved the trouble of having to go to different websites to look at different things. I mean, in all honesty, though, I would like to say that they have been a lot of headway made where people who are retiring or separating have all the information online and cheat sheets and out there, but it's really kind of nice to have it in a book, and here's a copy of the book. If anyone is interested in it, I definitely highly recommend it. And with that, I'm going to start with the book. Okay.
Okay,
So,
great.
veteran benefits for you. What inspired you to kind of put this together in a book format? So again, such a great read, very resourceful, a cheat sheet, if you will, on military veteran benefits that exist. And that is a very highly recommended book for those who are separating or retiring. So, what made you write this book?
Well, it's funny you mention it because it was a combination of two things. One, when I was in office, I used to get lots of questions from veterans, and I actually still do. What are my benefits? Am I eligible? It's so hard. Can't somebody explain it to me? And the
Mhm.
second was when I got out of office, I thought, well, certainly there must be a book out there. And there really wasn't. It was written by lawyers. The books that were out there were written by lawyers, and so they were really hard to understand, and they didn't have all the benefits in one book. So you'd have to go to learn about one in another book. And it was just troublesome. So I said, I'm going to make a book that has all the benefits and I'm going to make it easy to read. So the best
Yeah.
compliments I get from people are kind of like you said, it's all right there for me and it's easy to read. So
Yeah.
that was kind of what I was going for. And what I feel is I'll take you about 95% of your journey,
Yeah.
but you'll know how to complete the final little part because obviously everyone's file and everyone's application for benefits is a little bit different, but it's all there. Here's how you do it. Here are the forms. Here's what you do.
Yeah.
Please, and again, it's important, I think, for people to remember these are benefits veterans have earned. These are not entitlements. These are things by honorable service for the most part you have earned. So it's really important veterans access them to help their life post service, be really remarkable, not just okay, remarkable.
Yeah, nah, and I kind of like what you said there because it goes to kind of what the first question I wanted to kind of ask, right? Is when we're talking veteran benefits, disability and compensation. That's usually the one, everyone is like, okay, I'm leaving. This is what happened to me 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, whatever that scenario is for that individual, So let's talk disability and compensation, service connected conditions, right? Because
Right.
when I was looking at this, obviously I just retired on July. And so I know it was it was really interesting to kind of go through my whole medical history, my whole DD-214, all the different administrative stuff to try to figure out where I would fit in at the end of things. You have something in your head, in your mind of what your connected disability compensation may look like, but then eventually when you do go through the process with the VA, it either two things, it comes out the way you thought it would come out or it comes out completely different. So service connected, how do service connected conditions impact a veteran's eligibility for benefits such as healthcare, education, housing? Are they those nuances in the relationship between those benefits that you've seen?
Right. So the short answer is being service connected through disability compensation can be your access to benefits, right?
Yeah.
At above a certain percentage, you get free health care, no cost health care. So you really want to figure that one out. But let's take a step back and talk about disability compensation. Disability compensation is supposed to represent, like, what happened to you in service and how it affects your life afterwards. So let me give you an example. Say you served in World War II and you lost an arm. Well, you would be unable to work by and large in a factory with only one arm,
Yeah.
right? So disability compensation was supposed to make up for the wages you didn't earn. It's called foregone earnings, right? Because of my service now, my ability to make a livelihood would be affected. That's a pretty extreme example, but that's often what happened in World War II. So
Okay.
that's the thinking behind it. Something happens to you in service and it affects your ability to make a living. So a lot of studies go into place like, if you have hearing loss, how does that affect you? If you have limited use of your limbs, how does that affect you? So that's really the thinking behind it. So if someone leaves the service, well, even while they're in the service, they should be thinking about what's happening to me physically and even mentally. And am I the same person as I leave service as I was when I went in, right? My legs were fine and now my legs are less fine, right? So that's the thinking behind it. And that's how you apply for disability compensation, right? You sort of say, I was in the service, something happened to me. Not I was in combat, not whatever. I was in the service. I fell off a ladder painting a building. I was hurt during training. I was hurt playing basketball at the post gym. I was hurt in combat. So it's in service is the most important thing your listeners need to remember on this one, right? Then you'll have some demonstration of what happened to you. Hey, I went to sick call because I hurt my knee or something like that, right? And now that I got out, and the final piece, and this is real important, it still bothers me today, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously, if you got well, you can't really say you got injured, right? And so those three things, I was in service, something happened to me, and it bothers me today, are essentially the basis of your application for disability compensation. And as you
Okay.
pointed out, you'll file, you'll get a rating from 0 to 100%,
Mm-hmm.
right? You'll get a payment based on that, and it's tax free. So
Mm-hmm.
that's important to remember. And based on that percentage, you might be eligible for other things from VA like healthcare, but also don't forget states offer benefits too. So you might find that you don't have to pay certain taxes in your state. You might not have to pay certain fees if you go to a park or get a license to fish or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a gateway to a lot of other benefits. So that's kind of the short answer.
Yeah. Now you're absolutely right. And now that you say that, because I know one thing for me is when I looked at that, I was curious about the math, which one, just general math that we learn in school, and then there's VA math, which often is the question is, I have all these conditions, you get the letter, and then it's 10%. And you're like, wait, shouldn't that be a little bit more? But there are codes out there that shows you, kind of gives you a little baseline and idea going in what kind of math you're going to come out on the other end. So can you explain what those math, I know it's we could literally have a whole episode on just the VA math or not. So, can you kind of talk through that VA math and why it can be so confusing for veterans? And why is it not something that is just kind of like a simple formula that's embedded out there that people can maybe go in and plug in and just say, okay, you know what? I have this, I have this, I have this, bare minimum, at least as a starting point.
Sure. So let's go through two things. So first is, they identify that you have in fact injured or disabled. So they'll give you a rating, and the rating's based on a table, right? I hurt my knee, it's 10%, right? So you can find that by doing a little bit of Google search. What is that number? Okay. So
Okay.
that's kind of like the rating. But what you're talking about is what happens when you have multiple, they're called contentions, multiple injuries, right? I hurt my knee and my ankle,
Okay.
right? And so you'll get a letter and says, you hurt your knee. I'm making this up now, Didi. 40 is rated 40%. And when you hurt something else, it's 30%. So you
Okay.
naturally want to go 40 plus 30 equals 70, right? But
Yes.
they tell you, no, it's not true. I think it's like 60,
Okay.
right? And you go, well, that makes no sense. And I think that's what you're referring to. So VA math. So
Right.
let me explain it because it's very hard. And I made a LinkedIn video about this so folks can find this if they want to see me do math on a whiteboard, right?
That's
But
awesome. Okay.
the thinking goes like this, right? So you got to kind of bear with me here while we do some math
No, that's
verbally,
good.
right?
That's why
So
you're here.
if you get a rating of 40%, VA kind of use this whole body sort of thinking. That means 40% of you is injured or disabled, right?
Okay.
60% of you is well, right? So they break it. Now, when you get another rating, 30% for another thing, they
Mm-hmm.
apply the 30% to what is well. So in my example, 40-60, right?
Okay.
60% is well.
Okay.
They apply the 30% to the 60% that is well. So if you do the math, 30 times 60%, you get
18.
18%.
Okay.
Okay. They'll round that up and call that 20, and then they'll add that to your 40. Remember, that was your first injury.
Right.
So 40 plus 20
And give
gets
you
you
that
60.
60. Okay.
Okay. And so, see, if you have more than just two injuries or two contentions, they'll keep applying the percentages to what is not injured or what is well or healthy. Now,
Ah.
this is really hard to do verbally, but there are lots of websites that'll like let you do this into your numbers and it'll do the math for you.
Okay.
So that's the thinking, right? So it's they continue to apply the additional disability percentage to the part of you that is well, right? So this math kind of always comes up a little less than you kind of naturally think.
Okay. So then I know that eventually when you do get your benefits, you get to 100%. That's your cap. But based off that math, if you have a lot of these disabilities and you're able, and they give you the ratings, is it possible to go over 100%?
No, no, it's not. The math will never let you get there. In fact, what you'll see is if you kind of play this out, a whole series of little things will not get you to 100%, right? Because the fractions keep getting smaller and smaller. So it's very hard to get to 100% using small things. Generally, you get to 100% with a big thing, like a
Okay.
PTS or traumatic brain injury or something like that. So, but again, let's kind of take a
Huh.
step back, right?
Okay.
This is often very hard for someone to kind of figure out on their own. I think that's kind of what led you into this conversation. So
Right.
I encourage everybody who's applying for disability compensation to get some assistance from what's called a veteran service officer,
Yeah.
right? These are folks who've been trained in the VA processes who will help veterans at no cost do this right. They're familiar with the forms. They can explain the math. They can show you whatever. And actually, they can often ask you, what did you do in the service? And let me tell you what others normally have injured in that job you had.
Right.
Okay. So again, you can find a veteran service officer, often called a VSO or a service officer, from like the American Legion, DAV, Wounded Warrior Project, or from your state Department of Veterans Affairs. Every state has a Department of Veterans Affairs. They have service officers who can help. So I strongly encourage everybody to get a service officer if you're thinking about applying for disability compensation. They'll help you with the forms. They can explain the math we just went through, but also, most importantly, they can also talk to you about what else might be going on in your body, right? So, for example, they'll say, "Oh, were you a pilot? I bet your neck hurts." "Yeah, how did you know that?" "Well, you sat there pounding." "Oh, were you in a tank?" "Yeah, I bet your knees hurt. How did you know that?" "Because you sat in these weird positions." So they'll know stuff like that that can help you as well. So again, it can be complicated and overwhelming, but there are folks to help, and they'll do this at no cost.
Right. And I can attest to that because even me retiring out of Germany, the overseas, they do have a list of VSOs that can help you. And literally it was a nice little sheet, and I picked someone at a random, and
Yeah,
I called, and they were very meticulous, and honestly, because of their guidance through the whole process, I had my VA ratings done in a very short amount of time because I had all my ducks in a row, if you will, right?
yeah, yeah,
So that is correct, and I'll in my on my website I will leave links out there for folks that are looking for any kind of assistance if they're going through the process as well. And so
yeah,
you do talk to a lot of the math, which I appreciated. But another thing, when I looked at the whole process, is one key issue that often garners attention other than the math is the disparity that surrounds the 9/11 GI Bill, right? For broader concerns regarding treatments of National Guard and reservists under that Title 38 USC. For those listening and not familiar with that code, it covers veteran benefits and the what we call the Servicemen's Civil Relief Act that allows compensation for veterans. Can you, or during your tenure, can you explain how the current VA eligibility laws affect National Guard benefits, and why do these disparities exist? Now, I know that yes, I retired as a National Guardsman, then I worked on the Hill, and I know that a lot of these conversations, from duty statuses, the multiple training, in and out of training, orders, and things like that, always somehow plays a factor. And what you always hear is that, hey, have all your documents in a row, make sure you have all your paperwork. And those are great advice. But in my mind, I'm just thinking it's 2024. Can you talk to it? What, from your standpoint, do you think uh, Congress and or maybe the service itself can help the guardsmen, because sometimes that can be a nuance, right? And wanted to get your thoughts on the other side about that.
yeah. So I don't have a good explanation for how we got here.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just don't know the history of the law. Okay. And I don't want to speculate on, how you count someone's full time service versus someone's sort of part time service in the Guard, right? I just don't know how they did that, right? But essentially, the way to think about benefits is guardsmen and reservists are eligible for the same benefits, right? So you're eligible. However, there's the way eligibility is determined that really gets the guardsmen and reservists kind of like scratching their head, right? So
Yes.
the way to think about it is you're eligible if you have so much active duty time, but it's measured by who activated you,
Right.
right? And so if you're in the Guard and the governor activates you to go deal with a natural disaster,
Right.
okay, that does not count towards veteran service, okay? When the governor activates you to do national emergency stuff in your state, it doesn't count towards your veteran status. You have to get 180 days of, active duty status when the president activates you, right? So your Guard unit gets activated to go to the Mideast, right? Fight our wars or do whatever. The president has activated you. Then you count those days, right? It's Title 32 versus Title 10. And just this
Right.
gets into, but let's go. But essentially, who activates you? And so that's the problem, right? It's
Yes.
like if you're a guardsman, Like, how many days activated by the president do you have? And it doesn't count when you train for the 2 weeks in the summer. That does not count, right? So that's the problem. And then it's made worse because sometimes you get activated for 179 days. It's almost as if they're intentionally doing this to thwart you, okay? So that's what you've got to watch out. And that's why it's really important. The advice you got was really good, Dee Dee, which is have your paperwork and count those days. That's the frustration, right?
Right.
Now, I don't know how it's come to be. I know back in the day when I was in office, whenever I would talk to guardsmen, I remember going to the enlisted National Guard of the Army, like talk to these guys, you'd open up for questions. This was the issue they wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah.
It's legislative. So your time on the Hill, you know this, you know, and it just is what it is. So count the days, be aware of that. Now, having said all that, really look carefully at the benefits the National Guard offers through the National Guard. So, for example, tuition assistance, not
Yeah.
a VA program, but run by your state National Guard, can
Right.
often be very rich and generous and enable people to join the Guard and pay for college. So it's not as though there are not other, more positively, there are other programs to help our guardsmen, serve and get an education, right? So it's just, you got to kind of do homework, and they don't make it easy. I'll be honest with you.
Right. And then that's why I think for me, because you talked about the tuition assistance, I was part of that. That used to fall under my portfolio when I worked on the Hill. But, I'm always assuming if there's something that they could do to streamline it, because when you have two people who serve side by side, right, and you tell one person you have these benefits, you tell the other person you don't have these benefits. And I can understand, to some degree when they say, okay, you know what, you're not full time, you're not 365 7, 24/7. But then again, with a lot of the tempo that has changed and the guard is a lot more involved, that conversation doesn't, it transcends. It's got to move forward. And I'm just always curious as to know how the VA can better help the guard, the ARC component, better in the process of eligibility for these benefits, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
but
Well, I
you're
think I think you make a good point, right? Because back in the day, the Guard and the Reserves were a small function of our military. Now they're a much larger function, right? So
yeah,
it's probably worth somebody. And I know a lot of people study veterans issues, but I think they study the wrong ones. This is something worth studying and say this deal, the 180 days, was probably crafted on that old relationship, right? They weren't activated that much. The main army took care of it. Now we know they're getting activated regularly. So you're right. Someone should look into that. I agree on that.
right. And especially with the National Guard, the training piece, right?
Yeah.
That's the one which unfortunately renders many members ineligible for those essential benefits. Training, you know, I really wish I understood the steps being taken to on that end, right? On fixing that, because that's where I kind of have the gripe is, okay, when you bring people on for training, that should count for something. But just like you said, you keep up the records.
Yeah.
That issue of equitable treatment, I think, is where a lot of guardsmen have some issues
Sure.
with, right?
Yeah. And I think maybe the takeaway from this part of our conversation is that's legislative.
I
That's
know.
not a that's
Yeah.
not a VA issue or a DoD issue. It's legislative. So this is
Right.
where I have to encourage people, remember, you're citizen soldiers. Now you got to go do your citizen thing, which is you got to talk to your representatives and say just what you point out. Hey, I'm training, I'm doing all these things. I think this should be different, but it is legislative.
Right. And so with that, what about the GI Bill, right? And
Mhm.
so can you talk more to, and I actually for I'm curious, can you use, if you are a you have your VA ratings, you've got all that, but before you left, you have some time left in your GI Bill. How does that work?
Yeah. So ideally, people normally use their GI Bill for education benefits after they left. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so let's kind of talk about an easy example, and then we can do some hard ones, right? the GI Bill gives you education benefits based on your service, right? So you
Right.
serve for 3 years and you get 100% of the benefit, 3 years honorably, okay? You get 100% of the benefit. That means that they will provide you up to 36 months of education
Mm-hmm.
and pay for tuition and fees 100%,
Okay.
right? And then give you a monthly housing allowance based on where you get the preponderance of your credits,
Okay.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
3 years gives you 100%, or stated differently, say you only serve a year and a half. Well, then you'll get 50% of the benefit. So your time in service counts towards how much of the GI Bill benefit you'd get. Okay,
Right.
so 3 years now. There's some exceptions. You get a Purple Heart, you've been a prisoner of war. So let's not kind of do that. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it depends upon your service. Okay, you can turn it on when you're on active duty, but most people discourage that because when you use it on active duty, you don't get the monthly housing allowance. Okay,
Mm.
but you can turn it on, but you need to think carefully about it because there's the real value of the GI Bill education benefit is thinking that it's 36 months. So you don't get more.
Right.
So if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't plan it out right, there's a lot of folks who use it and then say, "Oh, I changed my major after 2 years. A lot of the college credits didn't transfer,
Okay.
and now my 36 months is up, and I didn't get a degree, so now I got to go into debt to get my degree." So probably my biggest takeaway would be plan how to use those 36 months. Classic example, right? I got out, didn't quite have it together, went to the community college with the understanding that I go to the big state university after 2 years, right? Great, but a lot of the credits from the community college don't always transfer to your major at the state, right? So now you wake up and say, I'm going to have to be in school more than 36 months to get the degree I want. And now I'm out of the GI Bill. So that's probably one of my big observations, which is the amount of time you have is finite. Use it wisely.
Okay. So you're saying that, you can't carry it over. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
I
no,
give
no.
you let me give you a scenario, right? Let's say
Sure.
you get 100% veterans benefit. You got your 100%. For the most part, you're in that state. Depending on what state, you have 100%. You don't have to get out of pocket to go to school. But before you left, you had 1 year left on your GI Bill eligibility, right? What happens to that GI Bill eligibility?
Okay.
Does that go
Okay.
away?
No, no, you keep it forever.
Right.
Okay. You keep it forever, but let's not confuse things. Okay. So when you say 100%, that means you are able to access 100% of the value of the GI Bill. The 100% is not service connected in this conversation. Okay. This is accessing the GI Bill. If
Mm-hmm.
you turned it on while you were on active duty, you
Mm-hmm.
have 36 months. If you didn't use it all and you
Yeah.
become a veteran, you have the remainder of those months.
Okay.
Okay.
All
So
right.
if you served after January 1st of 2013, your GI Bill benefit lasts forever. It
All right.
used to expire after 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now people refer to as the forever GI Bill. Okay. You have those 36 months until you use them all.
Right.
My point would be, yeah, the strongest advice is use them wisely
Right.
because you don't get more.
Got it. Okay. And so from education, let's float to insurance. That's
Mm-hmm.
another one, right? And
Yeah.
I can tell you my VSO was very good at giving me good education on the insurance options that I will have, right? Um, can you talk to that a little bit? And what I mean by that is top wave of what the VA offers as far as insurance goes, and also some advice that you would give when it concerns insurance.
Yeah. So everybody should think about insurance, right? I mean, life insurance and the like, and nobody likes to, right? Because you contemplate something happened to you and it's hard, right? If you
Right.
have a family or people in your life who would depend on you and you're not there, you should pay attention to that. Okay. Now, VA offers life insurance that is particularly helpful if you are service connected, if you are disabled, and you often can't get life insurance in the commercial market.
But it's like
Okay.
how much, I mean, but it's very little, right?
It's very little. That's the challenge. Okay. But it is what it is. Okay. So they do offer life insurance, especially related to if something happens if you pass. And they offer mortgage insurance too. If you purchase a home, you're service connected, right? You're disabled, something happens to you, you can purchase insurance on your mortgage. It is a low amount, but if you can't get it elsewhere because the commercial insurance industry won't cover you, it's available. Okay. Most importantly, I think what people need to think about is the right amount of life insurance, right? That's really important. Okay. You'll have some in the military and you can carry it over and, get continue that insurance. But regardless, people need to think carefully about life insurance, especially in terms of taking care of the loved ones that depend upon them should something ever happen.
Okay. Yeah, because I know when I saw, I mean, I've seen something as low as like 40,000. And I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's not even about but one of the biggest advice to doing that is coming up with a plan prior to your ratings. It's what I know I was that I was told. It's like, look, you
Right.
want to make sure you get everything done prior to that ratings, because then it becomes a lot difficult, and then you kind of shortchange yourself on the commercial market to try to go out if you don't want to tap into the
Right.
like VGLI. What are some of the is it just the VGLI that's only option for veterans that veterans have?
Yeah, this
Okay.
VGLI. Yeah, they should look into that. Yeah, it's a little complicated, and you're really uh, observant about the amounts.
Yeah.
That's where veterans kind of forget about, right? So life insurance, the general rule of thumb is like 10 times your salary, right? So you're making $50,000 a year. That's $500,000 worth of life insurance. Okay,
Yeah.
so you need to look and see what are your options. And the commercial markets, I mean, I don't want to talk people away from VA, but the commercial markets on insurance are very competitive, so they
Yeah.
might find something there that really works for them as well, right? And
Yeah.
the other thing people don't want to realize is generally insurance is more expensive the older you are when you buy it.
Yeah.
Right? It's just kind of math, right? You're closer to reaching end of life, and so they charge you more. So it's one of those things that's easy to talk yourself out of if you're not disciplined or getting the advice you appear to have gotten.
Okay. All right. That's good. So veteran programs out there. I could tell you, I know for me, when I started this podcast, for instance, right, and my website and my media platform, I had no plans on getting into any business at all. I was like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm probably going to just take my uniform off and don on my civilian clothes and go straight into a contract GS position. And if you want to work for yourself out there, what are some of the good veteran programs that I know? I don't want to give people away. Your book does give a lot, but I wanted to focus on the business side of things. I don't know what you can speak to on your end of those, but if a veteran was looking into trying to get into business, what kind of advice would you render to that veteran?
Yeah. So let's kind of go through some scenarios, right? So a lot of folks come out and say, okay, I'm going to get a job, right? So they go to
Yeah.
work and get a job, right? They
Yeah.
go work for a company. A lot of folks come out and say, hey, I'd like to do something where I work for myself. And it kind of depends upon how knowledgeable they are, okay? So if you don't know anything about business, obviously you want to learn.
Yeah.
You could take courses at your community college about business, how to manage the books, how to do whatever, there's stuff like that. There's specialized places like the program in Syracuse, the Institute for Veteran and Military Families, IVMF in Syracuse.
Okay.
There's Bunker Labs. They offer entrepreneurship programs for veterans and the like. Okay.
Okay.
So you can do a range of that. Another thing veterans should think about is you can work for yourself by buying a franchise, right? You can run
Oh.
a Subway, but you naturally tend to think about food, but not all of them are food. There's so many businesses that are franchised that you would be surprised, okay? And this helps you because, of course, they have all the training and all the programs and all the documentations. And so for a fee, you kind of are in charge of your office or
Oh,
your franchise, but they've kind of explained away all the problems and have trainings and the like. So it really does depend where you are in that spectrum. If you know what you want to do, you have a really good business plan, a lot of folks who help you. If you don't, there's a lot of ways you can train and learn. But the franchise is one that a lot of veterans are attracted to
yeah.
because of the training and the
Really?
structure around it.
Wow. I didn't even think of that. I didn't, was it high? Is it a high percentage of
Yeah,
how many
so
veterans?
yeah, it depends on what you get into. So
Okay.
again, with a little bit of Google research, if you go to GI Jobs is a great magazine. They also present a lot of information about veteran entrepreneurs and franchise. You'll see it just ranges. You'll be surprised at how many different opportunities there are. Home health care. It's overwhelming in terms of the possibilities. So that's something I encourage veterans to look into and say, hey, I want to run my own thing. I maybe just don't know exactly what it is. I don't have a solid idea, or other than just I'm a solid worker, I'm a good manager, and I'm very serious and dedicated, I'd
Yeah.
look into a franchise.
And so with that, I mean, what is the financing to that? You know what I mean? Because it's not
Yeah.
like we're rich. And so you
Yeah.
have like business loans. What does that look like for a
Yeah.
veteran? And is it also dependent, let's just say, depending on the ratings too? It kind of goes
No,
and
no.
ties in, or no?
No, it doesn't tie into your rating. It just ties
Okay.
into, hey, and sometimes they have programs for veterans, sometimes not. Generally, and again, you got to do your homework on this one, right? Generally, there's a down payment
Mm-hmm.
and a monthly fee
Mm-hmm.
for the use of the franchise, but you got to look into that. I don't want to quote numbers because it's all over the place, but you got to look into it,
Okay.
and it just varies, right? But
Okay.
again, think about that, right? If you're think about the attributes of veterans: hardworking, handle ambiguity, uncertainty, and the like, but maybe just not any real deep skills in a certain industry, right? Franchise kind of gives you all that, and you provide, the hard work and the energy, and you could turn it into something.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Okay. So, next program, big one, VA loans for housing.
oh yeah, yeah,
Ah, so can you talk to that? I don't even know where to begin to ask you that question, but
yeah.
I mean, if you want to talk to it and talk to someone who has one never used it, someone that has used it before for refinancing, and just some of those stipulations that are out there for veterans to be able to tap into that.
Sure, yeah. This is a really good benefit. I'm so glad you brought that up, right? Because home ownership, owning a home is generally in everyone's portfolio the most valuable thing they have, right?
Yes.
It really can create wealth if you do this right. And the very amazing thing about being the benefit of a veteran, being a benefit accruing to veterans, is you don't have to have a down payment. So let me give you an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Normally, when you purchase a home, they make you put 10 to 20% down, which is you got to come up with some money to purchase a home. So let's go to an example, right? Average home in the US is probably, let's say, at $500,000. And I could be off by some, so don't quote me on this, right? So if you have to put 10% down, that means you have to have $50,000. So if you're a civilian, you have to save a while to get $50,000 ready to purchase a home. And many civilians will never, ever be able to do it, and they will never own homes. But if you're a veteran, you can purchase a home with no money down, right? So you show up and say, I want a $500,000 home. They don't ask for the $50,000. They say, oh, you're going to use what's called the VA loan? Yes. Hey, no money down, and you can put all the fees and any other costs into the mortgage. So you can own a home well ahead of your civilian counterpart. All right. So this is something I encourage everybody to think seriously about, in terms of, not only do you have a great place to live if done right, but your home will increase in value. And when you sell it, you keep the difference, right? The $500,000 home, after 5 years, you decide to move, you sell it for $600,000 after taxes, you keep that difference. And that's a lot of money you can use a whole bunch of different ways, to include starting your own business. So it's really something people should think carefully about.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm always curious. So does that apply for, I mean, you always want to keep your financials in, square and up to date before you actually go into these loans so that you don't bog yourself down. But what does that look like? Does that go through the spectrum of all the credit scores,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
do you know what I mean? Because everyone is thinking, okay, you know what? I've got the benefit now. No matter what, I could have a 400, I could have a 600, I could have a 700. What does that look like?
Sure, yeah. So the way it works is VA doesn't actually give you the loan. They guarantee the loan. You would get the loan from essentially a financial institution. You decide you want to buy a home, you find the home, you do whatever, then you go to a bank or a credit union or something and they say I want to get a mortgage, and they'll ask you, "Oh, are you a veteran?" They'll say, "Yes." "Okay, we'll help you get a mortgage backed by VA." Okay?
Okay.
So the bank, or the let's use a bank in my very simple example. It just gets easier to talk about. The bank will then do a couple things. They will look at your credit score, okay, and they will look at what's called your debt to income ratio.
Mm-hmm.
How much debt do you have, and how much income do you have?
Right.
They'll look at those two scores and figure out if you're credit worthy, okay? And if you are, they're happy to make you a loan. If they're not, they'll probably try to figure out what they can do, and they might say no. So they will look at your credit score and they will look at your debt to income ratio, because that sort of shows like, hey, make $3,000 a month and you're paying $1,000 in a car payment. You're essentially 1,000 over 3,000. 33% is your debt to income ratio. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the max they look for is like 41 or 42%. So they want to make sure you are able to pay them back. That's what they'll look at. But again, each bank is a little bit different. Okay. And so that's it. But basically the value of the VA loan is no money down. Also, you'll generally pay a little bit lower interest rate because
Mm-hmm.
it's seen as safer. And you don't pay what's called private mortgage insurance, a payment every month to make sure everything's going to be okay. Because again, the VA is backing the loan. So you should be credit worthy. You should be prepared to own a home and understand what it means, but it is a very good benefit.
Hmm. Okay. That, because I think a lot of the times people think, one, the misconception was like, oh, you know what, the VA is the one that hands you the loan.
Yeah,
And
that's not
so
right.
no matter what, when they see 100% VA loan, guarantee, like, nope, not, they're guaranteeing it, they're not giving you the money.
That's
And
right.
so,
That's right.
okay. Um, are there any, advice you would place there for listeners who are near retirement or separating, right? What key benefits should they be aware of as they transition out of service, especially considering some of the disparities? What are some of those VA benefits out there that you feel like we don't tap into a lot of?
Yeah. Well, I think let's kind of go through what we talked about. Let's go. Let's go. So first, we talked about the education benefit, right?
Right, right.
And so you might say, okay, but I don't want to go to college, so I don't want to use my GA Bill. Okay, that's good, but it isn't just for college. You can get certificates and credentials, right? Say, hey, it's in a credential or a certificate is like you undergo some short period of training, a month, 2 months, several months, take a test and it says, hey, I'm skilled in this area. So right now, cybersecurity is incredibly hot. Everyone needs cybersecurity experts. You can do a cybersecurity certificate and suddenly you can be in that field. So you can use your GI Bill for certificates. You can use it for what we once would have called the trades. Hey, you can go to school for a very short period of time, become an electrician, um, heating and air conditioning, HVAC, right? You can get trained in that. And you can make a lot of money with these kind of skills and the like, okay? So I tell them, think about your GI Bill and other sort of things, okay?
Okay.
The home loan is a great benefit, but also one part of that benefit has to do with if you are service connected, right? Something's happened to you, you can get a grant from VA to have your house adapted so you can live there. Hey, I'm now in a wheelchair, for example. You need ramps, you need special bathrooms to accommodate you. You can get a grant to do that. That's called specially adapted housing.
Okay.
Okay. So that's really important. And the other thing I would point out is people talk about the first thing we began talking about, Dee Dee, which is being service connected for disability compensation.
Hmm.
A lot of people say, I'm fine, I don't need it, and the like, but that can also enable benefits for your family. So if something happens to you because of what happened to you in service, your family can get benefits. So I remind everybody, okay, you might feel like you're fine, but don't forget these benefits can enable benefits for your family. So think broader than just yourself, because later down the line, if something happens to you because of your service, your family will get benefits. So I urge them to think through that relationship with their family, right? So, for example, served in the Mideast, you were exposed to burn pits, you don't think anything's going to happen to you, you feel great and whatever. Okay, 10 years from now, you die of some cancer. Terrible to think about, but possible, right? If you were service connected because of your service in the Mideast, in my example, your family would get benefits, right? A payment, perhaps access to education, perhaps access to ability to purchase a home at no money down, right? If you don't do that and you weren't service connected, they would not get those benefits. So
Right.
I'd urge people to think about the benefits that could accrue to your family.
Yeah. And so those are very great advice. And I got to tell you, when you work your whiteboard and you go through a lot of those programs, what is the most response you've gotten from them? Like, what is the one thing, or I wouldn't, it's probably not one, but the top two discussion points that you get a lot of questions about?
Yeah. One I get is it too late to apply for benefits, especially disability compensation? A lot of Vietnam veterans came back. I don't think it was a great time to be a veteran back in the day. I just think everyone was generally not anywhere near supportive as we are veterans now. So
Right.
I
We're
think they shied
fortunate.
away
We're
from
very
it.
fortunate
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah, no, it was really sinful. So they all go back and say, hey, is it too late? So it's never too late. You can always come back if you think your rating is not what you want. So it's never too late. So that's the one thing. The other thing I encourage people is like, your life will change over time, right? So if you got a very low rating early on, generally conditions get worse. They tend not to get better with age.
Right.
Okay. So it's okay to come back and get what's called a claim for increase. Something happened to me. My hearing is getting worse. My ankles and knees or whatever in my examples are getting worse. So it's okay to come back and have people look at it. So I encourage them to come back. All
Okay.
right. I remind them of their family situation. And then I also point out that your benefits don't come at somebody else's expense. Because a lot of veterans think, okay, yeah, something happened to me, but I don't need this as badly as somebody I've seen who's in a really difficult situation. Benefits don't work like that. Congress always makes sure there's enough money for all veterans. So I encourage veterans not to think like that. So that's generally, and the final kind of thing you alluded to when we first began, please have all your records, keep all those things. It's so much easier to get benefits if you kept all your information. VA will still help you find them, but if you have them, your claims will be processed so much faster.
Yeah. And you do make great points. For any veteran out there, the key is documentation, keeping documentations. I think I kept a copy of every order, every 214, every single order, because I think people think they only keep the big things, the deployment orders, the the PCS or the permanent change of station orders. Every single order you were on, it's good to keep it. If you get an award, the citation copy, you keep it. Like this, everything. It just makes it easy to go through the process. At
Right.
some point. Uh, so the VA has come a long way. I know when I joined in '98, from now, it is really improved, and that's always something good to say out there, because a lot of people sometimes may complain about the VA and whatever they're going through. But what do you think? And I know you're not in there anymore, technology wise, right? Do you think the VA can do better with its platforms? Um, to make veterans know what they offer, to make things easy right off the bat. And I know there's security also involved with that. What did you deal with during your time, as far
Yeah.
as upgrading for information to to place information out there for veterans?
Yeah. So you're right. Since 98, things have gotten a lot better, right? Less paper, more
Right,
technology,
right.
more attention to veterans issues. Veterans are getting louder and more vocal about what they need, right?
Yeah,
More women in the service.
more.
People understand what
Mhm,
that means, more women veterans,
mhm,
right? But the technology at the VA still is old and antiquated. And
mm,
so, it is getting better, but I think, we really should have high standards for veterans, right? We ask them to join the military and say, when you're in the military, we want the very best military in the world. Okay. So that's what we expect. And then we come out and we say, okay, well, go to the VA and it's okay. It's not as bad as it once was. We said, no, 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 no. We should have the very best VA for our veterans. And by that measure, it just comes up short, right? We know they're frustrated. It takes too long to get my claim. It takes too long to get an appointment. It takes too long to deal with the stuff. So I think there's so much more that could be done.
yeah, I agree. You know, Paul, you've made very great points. As we wrap up, what final piece of advice would you give to veterans, especially those in like the reserve components? I know you did, you talked a little bit about that concerning keeping documentation, who may feel overwhelmed by the benefits
Mhm.
process and the disparities that they may face. What resource and organizations, because I'll be more than happy to get that from you. And again, I'll put that on my website, and I will definitely encourage people to also check you out on LinkedIn so that they can connect with you and see some of your whiteboards, which are very helpful.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start big picture and then little picture. So the big picture is, don't forget, for your service, these are benefits you've earned. The American public, through Congress, have provided these. Access them and use them. These are supposed to help you after you serve, what I call accelerate your pursuit of the American dream. Own a home, live in a great community, get an education, get a better job and a career, deal with any injuries or conditions you've got. These are things you've earned. Please access them. Okay. You're right. They can be complicated. Don't be discouraged. Talk to other veterans. Get help from Veteran Service Organization. So, Dee, if anybody buys my book, there's a whole appendix about who can help you at no cost, right? You can find those folks in there. You can Google search. At no cost is the trick. Okay. So make sure you get people help. I wouldn't be discouraged. The processes are complicated. It's because of laws, it's because of regulations, it's because of lawsuits. It isn't going to be easy, but you shouldn't be discouraged. And they really can make a difference. Own a home, that becomes valuable. Get a great education, move in a different direction in your career and do something like that. So I encourage people, and yeah, buy the book. And if you don't buy it for yourself, give it to somebody in your ecosystem who does, the uncle, the neighbor who's maybe disconnected but is a veteran, and help them find some things that can help them.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the things I point out. I always worry about older veterans, right? There wasn't that much attention, like we said, and now you wonder, do they realize what's available to them? So it can also help people like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Y- Thanks for sharing your expertise and insight with us today. Your dedication to advocating for veterans is truly inspiring. And if you're listening to this podcast and want to learn more about veteran benefits, be sure to check out Paul's book. Again, just like he said, Veterans Benefits for You. Understanding these benefits are key to making the most of your service. Thanks for tuning in to the Vetly Speaking podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and share it with a fellow veteran who might benefit from the information. So until next time, take care and stay informed.